breaking news. We are all over it. The news broke at 10:30, 10:48. I saw it. I said, hey, we got to talk about this in 12 minutes on the show. And so the U.S. Treasury has announced brand new sanctions against a crypto exchange for its alleged role in laundering ransoms for cyber attacks. Now, Lauren Feiner, I think is how you pronounce it, from CNBC, amazing reporter. Basically, what this is doing is it's marking the first time that an action like this has been taken against a virtual currency exchange. And it comes after a string of a bunch of cyber attacks across industries. And the Treasury has said that the ransomware payments totaled more than $400 million in 2020 alone, more than 4 times that of 2019. So obviously, anytime that you put ransomware, cyber attack, a big number on it, $400 million in a single year, people start to say, oh, we got to do something. Understood. The ransomware, according to this article, is a type of cyber attack where actors often shut down access to key programs and demand payment, usually in a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, to unlock them. Now, part of what is so interesting about this is there's a fascination in the mainstream press with the idea of Bitcoin being used as part of the ransomware, these cyber attacks. But as we know, Bitcoin has a public ledger. It is fully transparent and you can see all the transactions on it. So it's not exactly the best thing to do. Is if I call up John and I say, hey, John, I've hacked your computer. You should send me Bitcoin. Well, if John sends me the Bitcoin, what's going to happen is that there is going to be recorded forever in an immutable database, publicly available and auditable by anybody in the world, a transaction where John pays me Bitcoin in exchange for that. Now, when that transaction is there, people may not know exactly why that transaction is there. They may not know who owns the wallet sending or who owns the wallet that is receiving, but it is recorded in history forever in an immutable way that anyone can audit. So down the road, if all of a sudden we figure out that John sent ransomware to a wallet, and so did somebody else, and so did somebody else, and then we can start to identify, wait, this wallet is somebody who's doing nefarious activity. And then all of a sudden I go to withdraw the Bitcoin, let's say to fiat, or I try to move it into a different exchange and I happen to have done KYC AML on that exchange, or there's some other connectivity point, then it can be identified, hey, that was a bad actor, here's who they are. And then the law enforcement, the regulators, et cetera, they can step in, they can actually act. We even saw during one of the ransomware attacks, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, where people requested Bitcoin, that Bitcoin was given to them. The regulators and the law enforcement were able to actually see on the blockchain where the money was being traced. They continued to trace it. And at some point, the Bitcoin was sent to a centralized exchange account. And when it was sent there, immediately they were hit with a order to freeze the Bitcoin. Do not allow that Bitcoin to leave your centralized exchange. And the law enforcement was able to step in and kind of the whole thing unwound from there. So my point in that is, yes, it has happened, but people are very quickly waking up to the fact that you probably don't want to get paid in a digital currency that has a transparent ledger, because it actually makes it, in some cases, easier to track you down if you're a bad person than if you were to use something else. So the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control will designate the cryptocurrency exchange called SUEX, I believe. I don't know this exchange, so this is new to me. SUEX, for allegedly playing a role in facilitating financial transactions for ransomware actors. And the article goes on to say, while the Treasury emphasized that most virtual currency activity is legal, key point, while the Treasury emphasized that most virtual currency activity is legal. Really important here. Bad actors exist in every single industry. I can show you a ton of people laundering money in the legacy system. Doesn't mean that everyone in the legacy system's bad. Same thing here. There's bad people doing bad things. Doesn't mean that all of it is bad. As the Treasury says, most virtual currency activity is legal. The technologies facilitating those payments can be exploited by bad actors. True. Cryptocurrency transactions are decentralized and can be harder to trace than those conducted through traditional financial institutions. Probably false. The department said that in SUEX's case, it helped facilitate illegal activity for their own illicit gains. End quote. Now, I do want to talk about this last piece here, which is while the Treasury emphasized that most virtual currency activity is legal, technologies facilitating those payments can be exploited by bad actors. Of course, we know that to be true of everything. Guess what? Criminals, money launderers, drug dealers, murderers, they all use cell phones. Nobody's trying to ban cell phones, but the technology mostly used by people for legal purposes. Some bad people use cell phones. Same thing here. Same thing with the dollar. Same thing with everything. Did you know criminals use cars? We probably should look at cars, right? Did you know that criminals wear shoes? We should look at shoes. No, of course not. Nobody's claiming that, right? So most of the activity is legal, but there are some people who use the technology for illegal purposes, of course. But this next sentence is really important. cryptocurrency transactions are decentralized and can be harder to trace than those conducted through traditional financial institutions. I personally don't necessarily agree with that. I actually think that because they are decentralized and they use a public ledger, they are easier to trace the transactions than, let's say, in the legacy system, right? What I do believe that maybe this is getting at is the fact that it is harder to tie the recipient or the sender to an actual human identity because all you see is the wallet addresses. So there's a difference between being able to see the actual transaction and trace where the money flows through a system versus the ability to go to a bank and say, who owns this account? And the bank immediately has already done KYC AML and can just tell you. Remember what we talked about with the OpenSea situation is random people on the internet were able to look at the flow of funds, identify a wallet, and then quickly understand, hey, this person works at the company, they're buying these things before they're public. Maybe we shouldn't allow that to happen, or maybe we should, but let's flag that issue. You wouldn't be able to do that in a legacy system. So I think there's more transparency here, and which for the purposes of this, if you want to put yourself in the perspective of law enforcement trying to catch bad people doing bad things, it actually should make your job easier than, let's say, the legacy system. You can imagine if they were using physical cash, it would be nearly impossible to do this. But it also brings up the fact that there's privacy issues. So what happens if all of a sudden John and I are both good actors and we just want to send Bitcoin back and forth to each other? How much surveillance should be allowed in the system, or how much surveillance should there be in the system? Do we have a right to financial privacy? Right? Why should I have to give up my information if I'm not doing anything wrong? Should we actually have more surveillance on everybody to catch the small percentage of people who are doing bad things? Or should we not impede on the financial privacy and freedoms of every individual just because we're pursuing a couple of people? There's some very, very big philosophical questions in here. There's a lot of legal complexity here. There's regulation, law enforcement, and tons of lobbying going on, etc. So this is a really complex issue, but to see the Treasury come out and take action like this, I think most people agree that if someone is doing something bad, that should not be encouraged. That should not be allowed. Of course, if you're doing illegal things, they are going to come after you. Whether you like it or not, that's just how the rules work. If you break the law, they're going to come after you. If you don't break the law, then you're probably okay for the most part. But John, what do you think about this?
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense, right? If a bank was doing this, probably the same sanctions would be passed down, right? So if someone was doing an illegal activity and they knew about it and kind of let it go because they were getting a financial gain from that, they would obviously be sanctioned and reprimanded for that. So I don't see anything wrong with them doing it. I've never heard of this exchange before, so it seems relatively small. But in the grand scheme of things, I think it just lets people know that this industry is being watched, and it's actually more helpful to law enforcement and to people trying to catch those bad actors than anything else. People launder money through big banks all the time.
I mean, how many times have the big banks gotten in trouble for laundering money for drug cartels, the mafia, criminals?
And they probably do it more willingly than these exchanges.
I don't want to go down that road, but there's a lot of banks who know what they're doing, but the banks have a catch-all, a safety net. And I wrote about this one time, that actually what banks can do is banks can identify suspicious transactions that kind of sort of look, smell, and act like money laundering. But the bank doesn't step in and say, oh, please don't do that anymore. Oh, we refuse your business. What the bank does is the bank simply flags it to this organization, I forget the name of the organization, and says, hey, this is a suspicious transaction. And then what they do is they do that for hundreds, thousands, millions of transactions per month. And then somebody has to go sift through all of these suspicious transactions. And so if ever there is a situation where it's say, oh, X person was laundering money in the bank, the bank simply says, well, we flagged the transaction. Like, we didn't know what it was. We did our best. We flagged it. And so if you just flag as much as possible, one, it makes it harder to actually figure out what is good and what is bad, so that it's shutting down customers. But then two is you basically just say, hey, well, we flagged it. We can just claim that,
it's on you. You have to look at it.
Yeah, we did our job. We noticed something suspicious. We reported it. Versus the banks coming in and saying, hey, you can't do this. Now, I will say the banks are very good at finding out who runs crypto businesses and who's trying to do things in crypto and shutting those accounts down. They are amazing at doing that. Let me tell you how many times I've gotten a call from a founder who literally says, Pomp, I need help. I go, what's up? And they say, the bank just shut down our account, right? And then I got to go scramble and help them try to figure out a bank that will actually bank them. And so it's not to say that they don't have the capabilities. It's not to say that they can't do this stuff. It just happens to be that sometimes it is selective when they try to do it. But it's estimated that over $2 trillion a year is laundered and used for illicit purposes in the fiat system, which is about the size of the entire crypto market. So when we talk about it on an aggregate dollar basis, it's much, much higher in the legacy system. And most people say, oh, that's because the crypto market is so much smaller. There is a report out from the former, I think he's the CIA director. His name is Mike Morrill, if I remember correctly. And he estimates that about 0.4%, less than 0.5%. And I think there's another company that also came out with a report that I think says less than 0.5% of all transactions in Bitcoin are used for illicit purposes or nefarious purposes. So on a percentage basis, that's much smaller as well than, let's say, the fiat system. So I think, again, when you have a transparent public ledger, it drastically reduces the excitement that people have of using these assets for illicit purposes. What's up, guys? Bang, bang. Thanks so much for watching the Best Business Show today. If we're going to be the best business show, we obviously need the best partner. That's why the exclusive sponsor of the Best Business Show is SoFi. They're an all-in-one platform that allows you to invest in all kinds of different assets, including stocks, ETFs, crypto, IPOs, and they even have an automated investing function, if that's your thing. So before we start getting after it again, make sure that you go download SoFi, you get an invest account, and when you make your first crypto trade, regardless of what you buy, they'll give you $10 in Bitcoin for free. It's that simple. Head on over to SoFi.com/pomp to get started today. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope that you come back and watch more of the Best Business Show tomorrow.